It is great to see everybody here. There's a number of faces that seem, good morning, fresh, and that's always wonderful, especially for a Bible class. It's always a great way to start the morning. There is a handout that goes along with this class. I took a number count last week for last week's handout because I didn't print enough. So if you don't get one today, let me know, and I'll try to increase my number and my account or my counting by that amount so that we make sure everybody gets one of these handouts.
I read out of the first page, Michael, that came from last week.
From last week, so we need some more of last week's.
I've got 4 more of this week's handouts.
So if you need any more of the handouts, it looks like we're also out of the cover pages that I went ahead and made too. So eventually we will get caught up on all that. The goal and the direction of this class is we're going to move away from the open discussion forum that we've had in the past just because of the size of the room and the difficulty of conversation in general. So it's going to be a little bit more lecture. However, I do want you to raise your hand, ask questions, get clarification. I'm not trying to kill discussion necessarily. We're just trying to kind of cover a lot of ground as well as make sure everybody can hear, because many of you, like myself, are hard of hearing. So we want to make sure we're doing that. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to make the handouts very visually appealing as well as very informationally packed. Hopefully I'm making the text large enough to read. That's always a challenge with these. I could number the pages. Yes, that would be a good addition just to kind of keep everything in check. All right. So let's get after it here. We're going to start by watching a video from the Bible Project. This is an overview of creation. It's a really good 1,000-foot view of kind of what's going on here, and then we'll dig down into some of the specifics that come out of this as well. Maybe. All right, let's see if this will... There we go. Progress.
The first book in the Bible is called Genesis.
And we're going to look closely at the first page of the book of Genesis. It's a carefully crafted narrative about God creating and ordering the whole cosmos.
Okay, let's check it out. Now, the opening line of the whole Bible is, "In the beginning, God created the skies and the land."
Now, your Bible translation might say the heavens and the earth. In biblical Hebrew, the word for heaven refers simply to the sky above, and the word for earth does not mean globe, but rather the land.
The ground below us.
Right. This line is summarizing what's going to happen in the following narrative, which starts in the next line.
And it reads, "Now the land was wild and waste."
This phrase rhymes in Hebrew. The land was tohu vavohu, which means unordered and uninhabited. This is the ancient way of talking about the pre-creation state, what we might call nothingness. For the biblical authors, non-existence means having no purpose and no order. And the next line uses another image to say the same thing.
"And darkness was on the face of the deep abyss." What's the deep abyss?
Yeah, it's a dark, chaotic ocean. It's another common way the ancients described the non-reality that preceded creation. Now, here's where things start to get interesting, because in the midst of those dark waters, God is present.
And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters.
The Hebrew word for God's Spirit is ruach, which can refer to wind or breath or God's invisible presence.
So you can't see it, but God is present in the darkness, ready to bring order so that life can flourish.
Yes, and this ordering happens in a series of 6 days.
Each day begins with the phrase, "And God said," and then ends with the phrase, "And there was evening and morning."
Yeah, every day addresses those problems introduced in verse 2, that there's no order and no inhabitants. So on days 1 through 3, God splits apart that unordered darkness into 3 ordered realms. Then, on days 4 through 6, God fills the uninhabited wasteland with creatures.
Interesting. Let's see how that works.
Okay, so the first realm of order begins with light on day 1.
Ah, yes. Let there be light.
This is God's own glorious light that fills and contains the darkness as he separates day from night. God's establishing the order of time.
Okay, and then on day 2, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. What's the vault?
In the ancient culture of the biblical authors, the sky was perceived as a solid dome that holds back waters. God's depicted here as splitting the chaos waters in half, above and below, which creates the realms of the sky and the seas.
And then on day 3, let the waters under the sky be gathered into one place and let dry ground appear.
God is establishing the realm of the land, and it emerges out of the chaotic waters. And then there's a bonus creative act on day 3. God invites plants and fruit trees with seed to emerge out of the land.
Okay, so we've got the realms of time, the realm of the sky and the seas, and the land. And they all have order.
Right. Now, it's time to go back and fill these realms of days 1 through 3 with inhabitants. This is what happens on days 4 through 6.
So on day 4, let there be lights in the vaults of the sky.
God installs these lights, the sun, moon, and stars, as signs and symbols that reflect God's own light. He gives them his own royal power to separate day and night.
Then on day 5, let the waters swarm with living creatures, and let birds fly above the land.
Yeah, these are the creatures that live in the waters below, and those that fly near the waters above.
Then finally on day 6, let the land produce living creatures.
They emerge up out of the ground to live on the land. And then, matching that bonus act of creation on day 3, God makes a special land creature, human, or in Hebrew, Adam. Then, God provides all of those plants from day 3 as abundant food.
Now, over and over, God says what he created was good. But then, after making humans, God says that it is very good.
Yes, humanity is the climax of days 1 through 6, and their importance is explained in the first poem in the Bible.
So God created humanity in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
So humans come up from the ground like the other land creatures, but they're also more. They're God's image, which means that together, men and women embody and represent the Creator within his creation.
God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, ruling over the creatures."
This is the purpose of being God's image, to oversee creation as God's partners and representatives in the world.
Very cool.
Now, after the 6 days, we get a concluding line that links back to the key words of the opening line.
And so were completed the skies and the land and all their inhabitants.
Except there's one more day. It stands outside the pattern of days 1 through 6. It's the big climax.
And God completed on the 7th day the work which he had done. And he rested on the 7th day from all the work which he had done. And God blessed the 7th day and set it apart as holy.
So God rests on the 7th day. This is a standard biblical image where God, after ordering the cosmos, comes to rest and dwell in his sacred space. It's like the whole world is a holy temple where God lives with his people.
Now that phrase, there was evening and morning, it doesn't appear on day 7.
That's right. The 7th day has no end. That's because Genesis 1 is describing God's ideal vision for the whole cosmos.
A place where God lives with his partners to rule the world in harmony forever.
Yes, the 7th day is the goal of creation. It's actually so important that the author of Genesis 1 has woven the number 7 into every part of the story. There are 7 days of creation, 7 announcements that creation is good. There are 7 Hebrew words in the opening verse, and then 2 times 7 Hebrew words in verse 2. And then the statement about the 7th day has 3 lines of 7 words.
Wow. So the first page in the Bible is doing way more than just telling us how the world was made.
Right. Genesis 1 has been designed to show us that God's purpose is to share creation with his images so they can rest and rule it with him forever. And that purpose is what the rest of the biblical drama is all about.
All right. I do not know. I did not look that up. All right. So we get into Genesis 1 and 2. That's what we're seeking to cover today. And we are covering the season of creation. The Bible does not seek to prove, though, the existence of God. And that's an important point I made last week, and it's an important point for us to remember. In the beginning, God. If you don't believe that part, nothing else is going to make any sense. In the beginning, God. So the first point that is made is the existence of God. It's not argued, it's not debated, it's not reasoned, it is simply stated. In the beginning, God. So if you're coming to the book of Genesis, if you're coming to the creation story, and you're seeking to prove God, you're doing something that the text never set out to do. Now, I'm not saying you're doing something improper. I'm not saying you're being illogical. I'm saying that the text did not intend to make the argument. And you're stretching the text to make an argument it was never intended to make. That's not to say there's not good reason for us to have an apologetic on the existence of God, and that this is not necessarily a text that one could use. But it's important for us as we study a text to understand its purpose and what it is. So it does not prove or seek to prove the existence of God. It simply makes the argument that God exists. And it states that God is the one who created all things. I'm running behind this morning, so I'm going to skip that. It's more of a bonus point. In Psalm 19, David exclaims, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of his hands." Over in Romans chapter 1 and verse 20, it states that since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, his divine nature have been clearly seen by what has been made, so that men are without excuse. So the purpose of creation is to declare the glory of God. When we look around at the world, and I have done a ton of research into the apologetics of creationism and the existence of God and science versus the Bible and all of those things. It doesn't matter how broad of a spectrum you paint, right? You take a grain of sand and you look at the sky with the James Webb telescope or the Hubble telescope, and the amount of galaxies and stars that we discover in that simple space. It doesn't matter how close you look at the human genome or how closely you look at the atom. It all declares the glory of God. And anybody who has hiked the Rocky Mountains knows how grand and how vast creation is and compared to you. And if you doubt that, go find a 70-year-old up in Colorado who likes to go snow shoeing up in the Rocky Mountains and try to keep up. And quickly find yourself, whether you be a 20-something or whether you be a 30-something or whether you be a 50-something, how in shape you are and how vast that land is, right? So God's creation is indeed glorious, and it is a wonder to behold. Now, the word here for create, in the beginning God created, is to create, to form, to shape, to fashion as to something new. It's like to choose to cut down wood and to make and to form something out of it. Right? So in the beginning, God began to shape, and as a carpenter, I like the imagery of to shape and to form a project, right? To create out of it. So we have here God creating, God making. We jump over to John chapter 1. Beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? God is speaking these things into existence, and John identifies the Word as Jesus, who created all things. right? So we have a powerful image of God creating, God speaking into existence the world. Now, one of the important things to note as we look at the book of Genesis, and especially at chapter 1 and 2, it is written beautifully in Hebrew poetry. It's so important that we understand what we're looking at here is Hebrew poetry. Once again, the Hebrew text is not seeking to make a scientific argument as to the origin of all things. It is making a theological point in a beautiful way. Now, I'm not saying that the Bible is not stating how things came into existence. We think in those either-or mindsets. That's not how the Hebrew writer thought. That's not how the Hebrew audience viewed it. How did the world come into existence? God made it. How did He form it? Well, He formed it this way, right? But the text is not making a scientific argument for the order of creation and how God did it, or to what extent or time frame He used. It is making a poetic and a beautiful statement about what God did. And it's important to remember that, because we do not want to take the text beyond what it was intended to do. Now, I'm not saying, as a 7-day literal creationist, okay, I'm not saying that there's not valid arguments in this. I'm saying that we need to not take the text beyond what it was intended to do. When we do that, when we extend the text beyond what it was intended to do, we open ourselves up to fallacies and errors. Point number 1 on that note is my generation and the generations after me that went off to college and heard some arguments from professors and left the faith. Why? Because we opened ourselves up to see the world as only one way, and some could not see it that way in light of the evidence given. Okay? Now, theologically, if you're going to take a not young earth view, a not literal 7-day creation, you're opening yourself up to a lot of theological challenges. How do you have death, disease, and bloodshed and all of this evolutionary destruction and construction, and God say everything was good? How do you have all of that death, disease, and destruction of evolution, and then have death, disease enter upon the fall? So you create theological problems, but it doesn't make you theologically wrong, and it doesn't mean that your faith is less just because you hold on to what science teaches, or you have some different views than what Answers in Genesis might teach. Right, so if you have an amoeba come up out of a soup somewhere billions of years ago, and by great amounts of death and struggle and the survival of the fittest and all of these things, and eventually one day man, Homo sapien, lives and is created and exists and is at the pinnacle of creation, you have a lot of death, disease, and bloodshed before the fall. And that is not at all the picture painted, nor is that the answer given for why Jesus came. Right? If you have humans and then Neanderthals, and you have these different races of upright apes that we would consider humanoid happening at the same time, then how do you have one Adam? How can you then have one Adam or the second Adam who then died for the sins of all of the descendants of the first Adam? Right? So you create a number of theological problems. Right? However, you're not being illogical, and you're not being in heresy to necessarily try to blend the two together. Okay? Now, once again, this is coming from somebody who has watched 90% at least as of 10 years ago or 15 years ago of everything Answers in Genesis put out. Right? This is, I am a Seventh-day creationist, right? However, we need to understand what the text is teaching. We need to understand what the text is arguing and why it's arguing it.
I think the problem that we have is not understanding the word glory.
Okay?
And all of the Genesis is given to us to present us the glory of God.
Yes.
And many people believe that the word glory means eminent. No. It's the evidence. Glory is the evidence shown to us of the existence of God. That's the glory. But the glory of man. You can see the glory of man in this building.
Right.
The evidence that there's electricians. The evidence that there's woodworkers. This is the glory of man, that there's painters. By just looking around this building, the glory of man is perceived and is understood, that this building wasn't built by itself and it just didn't form itself and it painted itself.
You haven't seen the pew trees?
Never. But that's what the glory of man is. Or what does the word glory represents? The evidence before us. That's what the glory means. So the Genesis is to provide us the glory of God, the evidence before us to show us of his existence. Just like the glory of man is perceived in this building, so is the glory of God perceived in the outside world and in the universe.
Right.
And it is, I think that's one of the problems that we have, that we don't understand the word itself, the word glory, and we perceive it as something other than the evidence before us.
Right, right. And ultimately, and here's what we have to walk away from the book, or the chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis. God created it all. Right? Doesn't matter how you piece all that together and you think that actually in time and space happened. What the book of Genesis is calling you to walk away from these two chapters with is God created it all. And God is the originator and the glory of it all. Right? That's the important thing. So it is written in poetry, right? You have light from darkness. You have chaos to order. You have simplicity to complexity. You have the rhyming of God said, let there be, and there was evening, and there was morning, there was number, there was day. You have this continual beat throughout this entire section. You have the fact that God is calling it good. You have the weaving of the number 7 throughout the entirety of it. This is beautiful, complex Hebrew poetry that is absolutely wonderful. Okay? Now, that I have made a strong argument, in my opinion, for not taking Genesis 1 and 2 to describe just 7 24-hour days. Allow me to make my Answers in Genesis argument from the text. The day Yom, and this is in your handout, can mean a division of time. It's just like our word day, right? Back in my day, does that mean in a 24-hour period? No, that's meaning back in a time period, right? Well, that was his day, right? It could mean a lifetime, right? So day can mean a division of time, but of course it can also mean a 24-hour day. It can also stand in contrast to night, so we're talking about the daylight. Right? In the same way the word Yom appears and addresses all of those time periods. However, anytime the word Yom appears alongside the word evening, the word morning, the word or a number, it is always referring to a literal 24-hour day. Unless you take Genesis 1 and 2, or Genesis chapter 1 and 2 to be meaning the same thing, in which case you then have a breakdown of it.
And, real quick, that is not a new idea or phenomenon. In the Mexican culture, you've heard the word ahorita.
Okay.
Ahorita does not have, it can be right now, it can be tomorrow, a year from now. Ahorita, it's just an unlimited time span.
Right, right. Absolutely. Okay, so every time we read this word yom in Genesis 1 and 2, and there was evening and there was morning, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. Okay? That's a very strong argument, in my opinion, for looking at this in literal 24-hour day periods. Also, God is more than capable of creating all of the glory of creation in 6 days. In fact, my question is, why take so long? Why take so long? God could say it and it be. Yet he chose to at least take this 6 days for us, for our benefit. I think another strong argument, which was made out of our video here, is the fact that the concept of day is not stated in the seventh day, which stands apart from the 6 days of creation, right? So the fact that we then have this concept of the Sabbath being a long time frame, something that is currently going on and something that we currently have a hope for, and yet God then separates that in this language to have a literal 24-hour day where there was evening, there was morning, and then it was the numbered day. So I think there's a strong argument to be made from the text, from the language, for a 24-hour time period. However, we have to be honest about the text. We have to be honest about the language. It can mean just a period of time, right? So this is not a science book. It contains science, right? This is not a history book, but it contains a great amount of history. The point it's making is God made it. He ordered it. He's in control of it. It's to his glory. That's the point, right? We can make other arguments out of that, but that is his main point. Now, I had a number of questions as I was explaining that, and I want to answer those if I have not made all of that clear. So any questions? All right, hit me with it.
When did we start calling it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
That is a great question for...
Yeah, but the Sabbath, the Sabbath was the day he rested.
Right.
That was not, and so did he start creation on a Sunday?
It would have been translated from the ancient Hebrew calendar, because it was recorded on the ancient Hebrew calendar back then. It was switched to the Gregorian calendar, which we use in America today.
Right.
So we would actually have to look at the Hebrew calendar, and it actually wouldn't ever line up because they only have, I think it's 30 days each month or 29.
Yeah.
Every month is the same. So
Right.
go ahead.
Yeah, so let me address the Hebrew calendar aspect of this, because we are dealing with the Greco-Roman concept of time and the naming, right? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday. Those are all related to Greco-Roman gods. The Norse as well, right? So that's dealing with a lot of language, a lot of history, a lot of just rulers throughout time. Hebrew, the passage of Hebrew time was based upon a lunar and solar calendar, right? So it's not strictly upon a solar calendar or a passage of seconds like we currently have today. The day begins at evening, at sundown, and the day ends at that next sundown. Our day ends technically at midnight and goes until the next midnight, right? That's when ours goes. If you want to ask somebody practically when it starts on the morning, right? You start in the morning, you end at night, right? That's not the way that the Jewish passage of time would have operated. There was evening and then there was morning. It starts at sundown, that begins the day, that day then ends at the next sundown when the next day begins. Right? That's a very different kind of passage of time, but that carries throughout the entirety of our scriptures and creates a number of complexities that we kind of have to unpack. When we look at the week, right, and the passage of the week, and then it coming into this concept of Sabbath. And I have this in your notes in more specificity, because this is a very constant misunderstanding that Sunday is now the Sabbath. The Christian Sabbath is Sunday. That's nowhere found within the text. It's nowhere found within the text. The reason we worship on Sunday is because Christ rose on the first day of the week, because that's when the church began to meet. That is the pattern that we have. That's when they began to do that. The Jewish Sabbath, Saturday, right? Sabbath just simply meaning Saturday, did have to do with their passage of a 7-day week, right? And how that played into other cultures having 7-day weeks, I don't know all the answers and the intricacies of how that came to be. But there's also the concept of a rest, right? The concept of not relaxation, but the concept of rejuvenation. And there came to be this idea of a time to recoup, right? We have Moses writing about the creation and tying into the creation the observance of the Sabbath, the day of rest on Saturday, that would become the day of worship for the Jews all the way back to creation. But we don't have the first example of the Sabbath being commanded or observed until the Jews are actively on their way to Sinai. Right? We don't actually have the first command until the giving of the 10 Commandments. So we don't have any example of the Sabbath being observed prior to the Exodus. Right? So it's important to understand that we have the concept of a time of rest, we have the day of worship, and we have day 7, which we would call Saturday or the Sabbath. So all of those concepts are interwoven into this complex topic and discussion.
The complexity of the day of rest in the poetry is difficult because God doesn't need rest. There's an element of this is exposing us to a concept with the poetry and the God-inspired text to show us that there's a need for us to rest, but God didn't need the rest. And this is also right after time is created. So these are some crazy philosophical difficulties to dive into on one Sunday morning.
Oh, yes, no, most definitely. And to cover it all is a challenge, to say the least. Yes.
Here on earth, you need to take a rest. The reason for that, if God had to take a rest, then you probably should too, especially.
You don't need to learn that lesson. You're always resting. Everyone who knows Dylan knows that he does not know how to take a rest until his body gives out.
Jesus does the same
Yes.
thing. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, he rises from the dead after going through the excruciating pain. It's kind of like showing us how to rest. If God needs it, we definitely need to bring it on earth with the devil.
Right. And ultimately, the scriptures will teach us that Christ is our Sabbath day rest. Right? The concept of Canaan being the rest that the Israelites were seeking, but ultimately that didn't live up to it, right? So it became a type and a shadow. There's all sorts of complexity to all of this. Ernie?
The other complexity that I see is in history, every major culture has some kind of a creation story.
Yes.
I know a lot of people have heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh and others. China has a creation story. It's kind of strange, but I mean, it's something that, and like Michael was saying, we just have to read it as a story. And the argument, is it 24 hours or could it have been 2,400 years? You know, it's a complicated thing.
It is. It is.
But yeah, well, the very first sentence is all we need to remember, God.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely.
Even the Jews had a difficult time with it too. even I mean, this is nothing new, because in John chapter 5, verse 16 and 17, for this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus, thought to kill him because he had done these things on the Sabbath.
Right.
No, he had been working, but Jesus answered to them, my Father has been working till now.
Right.
It's like he hasn't taken rest. So,
And yet,
you know,
according to Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, 4, 5, wherever that is, that day of rest began after creation was completed, and he hasn't stopped. So God has done nothing since creation. No. We know the Bible is the explanation of all the things God has done since creation. Right? So all of those things. But yes, the concept here is that the passage of time and the delineation of time is a complex thing to figure out. And we can go to the scriptures and we can make an argument, and I've watched those videos and I've watched those arguments be made for the literal 24 hours and why that matters, and I can walk you through it and I can lend you my library and all of those things. However, the point of the text is not to make an argument as to when creation took place, right? You can go back and you can put together all of those genealogies, and we'll get there eventually, right? But the point of those genealogies was not to pinpoint a history calendar of the world. That was not its point. That may very well be a valid approach, but that is not its point. And it's important to remember what its point was. The point, ultimately, that God is making is, one, I made it, and the pinnacle of that creation is you. Because at the end of the day of creation, on day 6, God gets done making all the creepy crawlers, and then we have enough time upon that 6th day for God to create Adam. And we have Genesis 2, the rest of Genesis 2, explaining that day 6. We have enough time for God to create Adam out of the dust, to breathe into him the breath of life, to give him the instruction about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He has enough time to name all of the types of animals, right? We don't have huskies and golden retrievers and labs. We have dogs, we have cats, we have tigers, we have all of these types of animals. Adam gets done naming all those animals and goes, now I'm seeing a pattern here. There's a boy dog and a girl dog. There's a girl tiger and a boy tiger. Where's my other half? God puts him to sleep, takes out of his rib, creates woman out of fine rib. This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. And we have them sitting at the end of that saga of the end of day 6, Adam and Eve sitting as the pinnacle of creation, made in the very image of God, in our likeness, the complexity of the two, sitting as king and queen over creation, having the responsibility to tend it, to make it grow, and to bless it. Another point I will make, and I am quickly running out of time for even our traditional time frame of classes here, is Eden was a region in that new creation, and the garden then existed within the land of Eden. God places Adam and Eve within that garden that is within the land of Eden. And then, as we will look next week at the fall, God then takes them out of that garden and kicks them out of Eden into a barren land that has not a garden, that has already grown up. Right? So there's a complexity that is there. Ultimately, we have a responsibility of stewardship over what God has placed in our care, and we've made a mess of it. And that's what we're going to see next week, is we have made a mess of our stewardship as humans to take care of the creation God has placed us over. And that is the point of life, right? So we're looking at the beginning of all things. ultimately, we have a responsibility given to us by God as his image bearers to proclaim his glory and to tend what he has created and to pass it along to the next generation. And the book of Genesis begins the process of understanding where we came from. And while it's not a scientific explanation, nor is it a historical explanation of exactly what happened, when, where, and how, it gives us a beautiful explanation of what God did to give us the world. And from the Jewish perspective, is it scientific, historically accurate, or just beauty? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. And we have to keep that in mind. Okay, I am so out of time. However, we've covered so much. And I'm sure some of you want to argue and debate, and that's fine. You can come and pick my brain. That's fine. There is so much more to this discussion. I want to answer any lingering, nagging questions that anyone has. So here's your chance. If you want the strongest argument for the existence of God and for God as our creator who created all things out of nothing, I give you the argument for the existence of information. For information cannot arise out of non-information. It takes intelligence to create information. Even with AI, it has to start somewhere. So if you want the strongest argument that will absolutely blow your brain, and I have the video somewhere of some really smart doctoral person talking way above my level even now, and he broke my brain in high school. In the beginning was information. So that one's for free. Let's pray, and then you can come and discuss and debate and all those things with me afterwards. Father, we come before you today. We look at the beauty of your creation, all that you've done, even in our broken world that we live in, and we are so in awe of what you have done, how you have created us, how you have blessed us, the fact that you trust us. Lord, we ask that you will continue to guide and mold us, that you'll forgive us when we fall short. We love you so much, Father. Help us to seek you, to reflect upon you, and to see your glory in all things. It's in your Son's name I ask and I pray. Amen.